Welcome to Happy Homes and Gardens. I'm your host. My name is Daphne Royse. I am a real estate broker, architecture, and interior designer. Motion pictures are a popular means of expression, from black and white to the classic films to global 4D cinema. We have enjoyed motion pictures for over 100 years. Let's welcome Matthew Verkler, a San Francisco-based filmmaker for 3 decades, to share his insights. Hello, Matthew.
Hi, Daphne. How are you?
I'm doing well. How about you?
Couldn't be better.
Please tell us who you are and what you do.
So I am a filmmaker and an entrepreneur. I started my career in Japan, actually, and I've worked in all aspects of film production, from script writing to directing to cinematography, editing, special effects, sound design. Pretty much from start to finish, I've done it.
What brought you to Japan? How did you become a filmmaker?
So originally, I was in school for a year, and then I'm like, okay, time for a break. I was a missionary in Japan. That's what brought me there. And it's volunteer, you pay for yourself. So, and it was supposed to be 2 years. After 1 year, that was enough being a missionary for me. But I felt like I wasn't finished in Japan, so I just stayed. And then I stayed another 5 years, and actually I came back for 5 days just to see my family. They thought I was crazy. Why are you staying in Japan? And I'm just like, I feel I need to. So when I went back, I had $300 in my pocket, found a job in a day, which was kind of a business consulting gig. Now, I was just barely 20 at that point, but during school, I had worked for a mortgage bank, so I wasn't totally out of my depth. But I when I'm in over my head, I swim furiously, right? So I was doing this. I was working with vice presidents of these large Japanese companies, helping them get ready for coming over here to manage a subsidiary or something like that. There have been a lot of issues in the past, a lot of cultural and communication things. So that's what I did, and I had very good salary, and my clients were available early morning and in the evenings. So during the day, what do I do? Obviously I had a lot to prepare for my clients, but I also had a lot of time and I had some money. So I'd always wanted to be a filmmaker. I wanted to go to film school. My family's like, do something normal first, and then you can think about that later. And honestly, I wasn't ready to decide, when I started school. So, but now I'm like, okay, I started by buying a 35 millimeter still camera. Just started taking pictures, learning the lens, learning the film, exposure, composition, everything. I'd go to art museums to see what the masters did and other people. And I just consumed, art. And so at some point I'm like, okay, then I bought a video camera to see how motion changes things. And at that point, my sister-in-law here in the States, she worked for a publishing company that made the premier line of textbooks for film schools. So she sent me the whole collection. It was probably $2,500 worth of books. And so, I just started making stuff, and I'd read the books and I'd, try things and try this. And every month as I get my salary, I buy a new piece of gear, maybe it'd be lights or microphones or, another camera, then editing equipment, on and on and on. And I started making things to highlight things I was trying to explain to my clients. So that was kind of focused. And I do artistic things, right? Just for fun. I'm in Japan, there's so much to absorb and then capture. And then, of course, I'd mix it together, and I was composing at that point. I built a audio studio in my apartment as well. So I'd compose a piece of music, and then I'd cut, video to that. And one day I was at a company party, and I was in one of the back rooms showing some friends one of my more esoteric pieces. And the president of the company walks in, watches for a minute, and he's like, "Matt, did you make that?" And I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "Would you like to make our marketing video?" And I'm like, "You betcha." So, and that was actually real budget. And with that money, I just bought more higher levels of equipment and started doing it for some other companies too. And I'm doing 2 full-time jobs now, right? So I figured it was time to go full-time into film. And I only went to one job interview, answered an ad in the English language newspaper for a subsidiary of Mitsubishi Corporation and it was worded kind of weird, but I wasn't sure what they were looking for, but I'm like, yeah, what do I have to lose? So I go in, it's one of the weirdest interview experiences I've ever had. And I mean, it's a different country, a different way of doing things than we do. And as I finally get in to interview the president of the company, the money guy from Mitsubishi, and the head sales guy, talking for about 5 minutes, and I'm speaking in Japanese. That they had advertised for English speaker, but I just started with the Japanese, and they loved that, right? And 5 minutes in, I'm like, "I'm sorry, I gotta go," because I had a gig across town, and a bird in the hand, and all 3 of their mouths were just like. It wasn't intentionally a power move, but it was a power move, and got the callbacks and finally got the job. And I was supposed to be a writer, producer, director. And 2 months after I joined the company, it morphed into a post-production house, doing the editing, special effects, and all that for commercials. And they're like, "Matt, we have this new system from America. No one here knows how to use it. Do you want to try it?" And I'm like, "Sure." And within another 2 months, I'm doing post-production for commercials at the biggest commercial world market in the world at a high level, and I'm in way over my head. It's crazy. But again, I swim furiously, and within 3 years, I got a killer reel. And then one day it was time to come back to America. I woke up, I'm like, I got to get back. And so I came back.
Was that very difficult to do that in Japan?
Well, in the ad agency world, it's difficult anywhere, but in Tokyo, let's put it this way, the agency producers, they were dying in their early 30s. That's how hard they were working. And I was working harder than that. I was in my early 20s. When I was 24, I got silver hair here. I was just working so hard. Luckily, when I got a better life balance, my hair went back to normal. But, I was doing 480, 490 billable hours per month in the chair. And all of this extremely high stress with a bunch of agency people arguing over every single thing I do. And, but boy, I recognized what it was. This was my chance to get to the top and then move on. So yeah, it was hard.
You say 480 a week or a month?
480, 490 hours a month. And if you do the math, that's an average of 16.7 hours per day. And, so I'd literally work 3 days in a row without sleep. Then I'd get a little bit of sleep and then I'd keep going. It was just crazy. And I kept telling my salesman, it's like, yeah, I can do this, but only so far. You have once they accept a job, I have to do it. And so they did not exercise input control. And I went as far as I could, and then it was time to, you know, get a real life.
Have you seen changes in the filmmaking and entertainment industry?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, and there's, many different areas. There's technical, the way things are done. There's the business side. There's how people see. So which area should I speak to?
Well, I'm having more interesting in music video, documentaries, or movies.
Right. So when I started, that was basically the end of the 80s, and music videos were a big thing. And bright, bold colors, all of that. Grunge started to hit around 91, 92, 93. I was back in the States by 93. So stylistically, as always, you see changes over time. And then you see reverberations as, like right now, we're kind of going back to the 80s almost, right? So stylistically, that's true. Music videos, actually, we're doing one right now, but that world isn't what it was, right? I mean, does anyone watch MTV, and are there videos on MTV? I don't even know. Um, the music industry definitely changed. Apple basically kind of wiped out their business model. Um, so now the only way they make money is with concerts, and that's why they're so expensive. Um, and videos were used to drive, like CD sales, right? Now, definitely bands use them to promote themselves, but it's not like it was. Um, so documentaries are just kind of, I mean, the one thing that's changed with them is production value has gone way up. Um, Streaming has changed things to where, before, it would be, like on a cable channel, or, on VHS or DVD or something. Now it's on Netflix, Amazon, and in those environments, limited series are kind of the thing right now. So instead of having like a, you know, hour and a half, 2 hours documentary, that's a lot to go through, especially for, something that isn't really exciting. But 30 minutes at a time, you betcha. That's, so so you see all these documentaries on, like the Fire Festival. I love that one. And it turns into a limited series that you can just kind of watch over dinner or something. And so that's one of the changes in that world, as well as the production value. Just cameras these days are so good. There really is no barrier to entry financially. I mean, anyone could buy a camera and some editing software, and if they're the right person, they can make amazing things. And that actually applies to kind of the whole industry. And on the production side, you still need an army of people, depending on what you're doing. My company, we were really good at working with a tight team, but usually you need a whole bunch of people to do different parts of the job. But in terms of the cost for the equipment and so forth, that's, compared to before, it's gone down to essentially nothing. In the movie world, um, big changes, I think. So streaming is doing to feature films what Apple did to music 20 years before, right? And so, the business model, actually, COVID, of course, wiped out theatrical. Tom Cruise, I think, single-handedly has uh, brought it back with Maverick, and to some extent with Mission Impossible, but it was really Maverick. And now you see this resurgence in the theaters. I love it, because movies really should be seen in theaters, but or at least certain kinds of movies. But mostly it's streaming, and streaming is such a moving target now. Netflix really pioneered that business model, and Amazon too, and others. But now it's moving towards ad-supported content, right? Where even Netflix, with their subscription model, is moving. They're testing ad-supported content, which brings us right back to broadcast TV, which is kind of interesting and ironic if you think about it.
Let's talk about the tight team you mentioned earlier. What are the minimum members needed in a team to produce some maybe documentary or any videos?
Well, first of, I mean, there's kind of the usual way, and then there's the auteur way. So an auteur, the usual way takes a lot of people. So, you know, you have a writer, you have a director, you have a producer. Sometimes those are all the same person, right? Actually, a lot of times they are. But then you have the cinematographer, you have the sound person, you have lighting people, and the bigger the set and the more complex, the more people are needed. On cameras these days, you're shooting 2 or 3 cameras. Each camera probably has an operator, a first assistant camera who's really focused on focus, pulling focus. Second AC would be, you know, just kind of setting up the camera and so forth. And so you have all these different roles, and the bigger the set and the more complex it is, especially action sequences, you just need a ton of people. But like in documentaries, so I just started a new documentary in my company, and parts of the shoots, we've done 4 shoot days already. And one of those I just did myself because it was, the opportunity just came up. I had a camera, I had like an onboard camera light, I had some good mics, and it's, you know, because I know every part of the process, I can do this. And, you know, I'm interviewing the subject, and I've got a monitor here so I can see what the camera sees to make sure it's in focus and so forth. And I'm asking the questions, and I'm listening to the audio. But that's usually you have more people, and it'd be nice to have more people. But, you know, are you familiar with Robert Rodriguez? He was really big until maybe 10 years ago. He did like Desperado, he did the Spy Kids, he just did a whole bunch of stuff, right? He's what's called an auteur, which means he really does almost everything himself, as much as possible, including the editing. And not to compare myself to him, but I'm kind of the same. So depending on what we're doing, you know, I could be doing almost everything, including in the production and the post-production. On the production side, you know, definitely we need at least 2 or 3 of us, or you know, I'm going to miss something, right? But on the post side, you know, the more work we have and the faster we want to work, obviously we need more people. But one of the benefits of a tight team is there's a lot less communication needed, and so it's more efficient, and we can turn things around really quickly. And of course, we can work to a budget, because if you have to hire 10 people for something, you know, the money starts racking up really quickly. So it does help the more challenged budget be possible.
You mentioned you were working on a documentary. Can you share any details, or when will you release this film?
Boy, that's always the question. How it started was I was at a networking event, and I meet this guy, and he finds out what I do, and he's like, "You got to meet my dad. What are you doing Saturday?" And I'm like, "I can you come by and meet him Saturday?" I'm like, "Sure." So I cancel my Saturday. I sit down, I start talking to him, and after 10 seconds of talking to him, I'm like, "Stop. Let's talk about general things, but the story that you're telling me, we need to be filming you telling me this." So we came back a week later, 3-camera shoot, in their living room, it's hard to fit a 3-camera shoot in a living room, but lights and everything, and then the next day was an event related to his background that it was very serendipitous, and because he's getting on in years, we're not waiting. We want to get him telling his story in the can, and then we will work on the broader aspect later. So when will it come out? That depends on funding. So we started with zero funding, just like boom. We have the tools, we have the people. We're just going to start. But now we have enough filmed to where we're making a promo and we're working on fundraising. And what the money will do is help us to broaden the story. We're going to need to go to the National Archives. We're going to need to interview as many people as we can. And if we get real budget, we want to do recreations of pivotal points in his story. So money helps us focus and do it faster, but money also helps us do more, so it will take longer. This is going to take a year, I'm sure, at least. But if we could get it done sooner, we would. But a lot of times documentaries will be many years in the making.
What is the complication that would take that long?
Well, so in the documentary world, usually there's very little money involved, and so you're fitting it in between other things, right? And with independent filmmakers, whether it's documentaries or features, it's like 90% of the job is fundraising, which is kind of sad if you think about it, because here, if they're really good creative people, it'd be nice if they could just create. But the fundraising is such a big aspect, and we have an advantage because so much of all of our infrastructure really is built in. So I can greenlight a movie very easily, which most people can't do. But if you're trying to survive and pay the bills, a documentary which may never pay off, or you're trying to get funding as you go, that's what takes time. And also it's for me with the documentary, you start with an idea, a subject, whatever, but you're not really sure what you're going to find, and that odyssey of discovery can take a long time, because you don't know what you're going to find. It's like a sculptor starts with a rock, and as they start removing parts of the rock and what they're making starts to emerge, they aren't exactly sure what they're going to find inside the rock. So that can be a time-consuming prospect.
What has always been the most difficult part of a production in the filmmaking?
Boy, I'm sure if you asked 100 people, you get 100 different answers. I think having a good idea that's somewhat original. There's nothing new under the sun mostly, but sometimes there's something new. I think that's really a hard part on where you have actors and crew and stuff. There's a lot of human issues. It's often said that directors are like psychologists, and they kind of need to, especially with actors. Actors have such a hard job, actually. They're especially, you think of all the pressure. Here they are, especially for women. Women really care how they look, and of course male actors too. And when your face is like this on a giant screen and you have like $1 billion franchise riding on you, the pressure is insane, right? So I think a director, one of their biggest jobs is to provide a safe emotional space where actors can do what they need to do and explore. And that's a very sensitive thing. The other thing about actually making a movie, TV show, whatever, but especially features, is the ending is the most challenging part. You can have, so often I see movies that up to 90% of it's like fantastic, and then the ending is just like, what just happened? And it's not that they're bad filmmakers. It's just that it's extremely challenging to wrap a story up. And focus groups, I think, are part of the problem here because, focus groups, they want to see how people react. But if you just make something based on focus group reaction, you end up with something that's mediocre at best. And you see that not just in film, but in many products. Just my opinion.
Ending probably the most important part for any films. Your disappointment, is it based on the writer or person making the film?
Well, at that point, I mean, so who is actually writing a film? You have credited writers, you have the initial writer or writers, but it's a collaboration, and a lot of writing actually gets done in post-production. And there was a documentary back long ago, but it was a very famous example. I think it was called Running Brave. I believe it was about a Native American track and field athlete, right? And when the movie came out, it was a stinker. People are just like, ugh. But then they re-edited it, and it became like a very well-known and well-received feature. So it's never done until it goes out the door, and especially with documentaries, the writing really is in the editing. But with a feature film, unless you are someone who has the ability to control, and in the studio world, there's very few people like that. If you have the ability to control, it will be what your vision is. It can be a singular vision. Otherwise, there's a lot of fingers in this pie.
Do you have your favorite movie producers?
Oh, producers?
Mm-hmm.
It's funny. How often do we think of producers versus directors? I definitely have some favorite.
Don't they produce and direct mostly?
Well, oftentimes those are different things, right? So this one I should have done some research on because there's so many ones that I like. I really need to highlight. There's an interesting. So historically, back in the '60s, there was a guy named Sam Peckinpah, and he did westerns and some action pictures and stuff. And he was an early introducer of kind of a next level of violence, which I'm not sure that I'm going to applaud here. But as a filmmaker, he really told gritty, deep stories. And then a guy that worked with him named Walter Hill, he became a filmmaker himself and kind of carried on this kind of gritty tradition. And they're not generally known as great filmmakers, but I sure like them. Something you can really dig into. Michael Mann, who did, he did Miami Vice back in the '80s, right? I honestly, I've never watched a minute of Miami Vice. But later on, he did a film called Heat, and that was one of the more amazing films I've seen. I don't know, I could go on and on. I love the Coen brothers, every single thing they do, almost every single thing they do. And the Coen brothers, they kind of started with Blood Simple, Raising Arizona, and Big Lebowski, on and on and on. Their dialogue is what sets them apart, and just kind of their command of the characters, and these characters just come alive, and you really care about them. But the dialogue is just spot on. In the Big Lebowski, I don't know if you've seen it. It was from like later '90s. the characters are speaking in a way that sounds very impromptu, right? It's like a lot of dude, that kind of thing. Every single one of those words was scripted. And there were almost no variations in how the actors delivered the script. So,
Interesting. Very
yeah,
interesting.
yeah.
So let's talk about technology. What is your view of AI in filmmaking industry?
Well, my view is complex. uh, I think the most simple thing I can say is with all technology and AI as well, it's either going to work for you or it's going to work against you because you cannot stop it. So AI, right now the writers are on strike in Hollywood, the screen actors are now on strike, and it's not just Hollywood as we know. Anyone who's a union writer in the WGA, they are on strike, and so there was an award show a month or two ago. There was no script because the usual script writers are on strike. So this and and they're not just striking and not working, they're also disrupting sets. So these kind of strikes happen every, I don't know, 15, 20 years. And, when the writers go on strike, you have a supply of scripts, right? And you can just keep filming until those run out, but not if they're going to do classic union tactics where they're busting onto sets, they're disrupting sets. And of course, everyone on set is, with them in spirit, even if they're not striking yet. So why are they striking? A lot of it's about distribution. And it's also about AI, because if you're a writer and someone can just say to ChatGPT, write me a horror comedy rom-com in the style of Stephen King meets Todd Phillips, and it will pump something out. And you prompt it to massage it and stuff. But basically, it's taking, because these large language models have been trained on all this material, you're taking the essence of all these different people. Now, people have been stealing, art probably since the dawn of man, right? If someone wrote a cave picture, someone else probably said, "Oh, I could do that too, but I'm going to add, 3 arrows instead of 2 in the bison." But now with ChatGPT, it's like a producer could just kick things off and cut the writers out. And now, of course, we're on the dawn of being able to do the same thing with actors and imaging, right? And so, okay, we want our star to look like Tom Cruise meets, I'm sorry, I keep mentioning Tom Cruise. I'm really not that big a fan. Tom Cruise meets Liam Neeson, right? Okay, and AI can create that, and very soon it will be a viable thing. So who owns someone's likeness, and at what point, whether it's writing or image, the way you speak, whatever, and if it gets morphed into something else, do you still own part of that? That's why they're striking. And I'm with them. Now is the time to figure this out, because business people, and I'm a business person too, but they don't want to pay anyone anything unless they absolutely have to. So there's a tension between, the artist and the business side. So this year I've done a lot of delving into AI and, where is it going and how are people are using it. There's a guy who he has a company called Immortal Studios, and they have this special kind of martial arts universe that they're creating, kind of like Marvel has their superhero universe, right? And
That's
so how they're
Peter Pei Huang?
yeah, Peter. Yeah, you may have seen him. So they're using AI. So this is kind of a plug for Immortal Studios. They're using AI to keep all their characters and storylines straight, because fans, they know this stuff. And if you think about like Star Wars, this character did this thing in this book or this comic, that how do you keep all that straight? They're using AI to do that. And I think that's a very good application of AI. I think in general, whether it's film or other industries, AI, let's look at it as a way as a force multiplier for human effort. And for me, as long as humans are in charge and humans are involved in what we are creating is something human, then AI is just a tool. If AI really cuts humans out of the equation, then I think we have a real problem.
I do have a question for you when you mentioned about AI. For example, for songs, if you have a song repeating 3 notes compared to somebody else that has a song, you have the copyright issue. Would that apply to the films?
That's the question. And where does this stuff get ultimately figured out? The courts, right? And so it's about lawsuits, and lawsuits are about money. And, earlier examples of this would be Queen and Vanilla Ice, right? Under Pressure by Queen and the Vanilla Ice, Ice Ice Baby, the bass line was the same, and it was in the courts, right? In the 80s, early rappers were taking James Brown vocal rips and putting them in their songs, and it was finally James Brown just kind of embraced it, and he did an album with a rap group called Full Force. And it's like, at some point you just, we'll figure this out. There will be legal cases. There's going to be some precedent. Anyone who says they have an answer for this is lying. So I don't know.
Do you ever see any feature of Web3 and NFT in film making?
Yeah. And I've definitely this year I've been diving into that heavily as well. And so Web3 is about decentralization and about blockchain, right? And NFTs are not just, $69 million pixel art, stupidity. I mean, it started that way a bit, but it's Web3 and NFT I see as a way for viewership to have a tangible relationship with content, if that makes sense. So in the old days, you watch TV, you watch the ads. Okay, it's very one-sided, and the only feedback mechanism was the Nielsen ratings, right? Then VHS comes out, people buy, you can see what the sales are. They have the creator has better visibility into the audience, a little better, DVD, et cetera. But now with streaming, even more visibility. But I think NFTization, where, if a viewer can, buy something and have a right to keep watching it, even if whatever streaming service they've subscribed to somehow stop supporting it. I think there's an opportunity here, but also NFTs help reward viewers for contributing to the overall property. And if you think of like the Star Wars universe and the Marvel universe, I mean, people, they have these conventions and the fans can really contribute, and through NFTs, they can actually receive some tangible benefits, which encourage them to contribute more, and the fans also then kind of start help marketing. And it's still very early, I think, but that's kind of what I'm feeling like. This is what's going to make sense. And the problem with blockchain, of course, is the computing power. And that's also an environmental concern. But if it's something more focused, I think the computing power required is much less. So the with all of these technologies, you have the initial phase, lots of stupid stuff happens, and there's all this hype. People don't understand it. Tons of money gets invested because it's the brand new shiny thing, right? And once that subsides, then you start to get to the real usefulness. So with the internet, the late 90s, the internet boom, even Business Week magazine was calling it, oh, it's the new economy. All the old rules are gone. It's ridiculous, right? Economic rules, the principles, I think they will always exist, at least when humans are involved. And so all this investment happened, then there was a big crash. And then, so that was Web 1. Web 2 is like, okay, now we're going to be smart and make smart investments and really figure out what this stuff is good for. I think the same is true with Web 3 NFT blockchain. That the excesses hopefully have mostly occurred. And so now I think we're starting to see really useful things. With AI this year, it's the brand new shiny thing, right? And tons of money. I mean, this is a hard year for companies, especially startups. It's a perfect storm of all these challenges, but AI startups are still getting funded. Now, investors, at least as I've seen this year, I think they're doing pretty good due diligence. Is this just, are we just slapping the term AI onto some other business case? There is a lot of that happening, but if it's something real, AI startups are getting funded, but there's also a lot of stupidity this year. So Web3 NFT, I think now is the time where it's going to start getting real and useful.
Okay, let's go back to your passion. What is your favorite kind of a film to make?
That's tough because I've done so many different kinds of things over the years. A lot of it entertainment, a lot of it corporate marketing. Some of the corporate marketing stuff, I mean, if I'm really satisfied with the result, then I love it, right? And there are some corporate marketing things that I'm just extremely proud of. So it's not really an answer, but something I'm really proud of and really connected to. My own content, of course, even more so. Over most of my career, I've worked on other people's content, right? And that's how I make money. Even on things where other people are not making money, I'm making money because I'm getting paid for what I do, right? When you make your own content, it's a big gamble. It's a big risk. But one of my favorite things I did was a few years ago, a high school reunion, right? I'm like, I'll interview some people on green screen and I'll put a 5-minute thing together for the reunion. It'll be cool, right? Well, I got so much good stuff, right? That the hardest part of this is bringing it down to making something short is very difficult, right? I had all this great stuff, and so it's a winnowing process. I ended up with I think 8 like 5-minute segments, that it was like 8 little episodes, and they played throughout the reunion. And it'd be segment plays, and then the MCs do their thing. They were hilarious, back and forth, and the feeling in the room, it just like brought us all together so much. It was, I think, probably the most satisfying thing I've done so far. And the MCs, they asked me, so how much would this have cost to make, if you're billing a client? And I'm like, yeah, $125,000, $150,000 that I did for nothing, but it was just, and seeing people connect with it so deeply was very satisfying.
That's great. That's great. You are very creative and talented person.
yeah, I'm really into what I do.
Well, thank you, Matthew, very much for your time today. I love all the stories that you share with us.
My pleasure. My pleasure.